about the non-evolution of the travel UI. I did Travelocity and then I did Kayak. So I've done two. So that's the UI in 1996. And there's the UI today. You can see it's been dramatic change. And this is the biggest part of e-commerce. A lot of people don't know this. You take books and fashion, electronics, put them all together. It's nowhere near how big travel is. So I got a call from Ginny Rometty in 2005 or 2012. Said, can you come and teach Watson about travel? That ended up them investing in a company that we started. And we did natural language, and we did image search, and we did text search of reviews. So you could say, I want a hotel in Singapore for anniversary near Emerald Hill, so on and so forth. And on the next screen, you'd actually get a hotel on Emerald Hill with a pool. And if you can imagine how hard that is to do today. First of all, you have to know where you want to go. Secondly, once you get the list of hotels, you've got to ask for a pool. Then if you get a list of hotels with a pool, you have to search through 3,000 images to find the pool. And then you have to look at the map. Right? So it just hasn't fun. We happen to get all the VRBO data and work with them in the POC. Somebody says 2-bedroom home near downtown with a graveyard in Austin. They can't answer that question. But because we looked at all the images and read all the reviews, we could actually find that property, show a review, and the lead picture was the backyard, right? So they didn't even know how to do that. Unfortunately, here's another one. You all pay mileage roulette, right? I want to use my miles. How do I use them? Why can't I just say, what islands can my wife and I visit in February using miles, and have it tell you that? I proposed that to American Airlines. They said they could do this themselves. You notice they haven't done it. Back then, we were pretty limited, right? Because the domain space couldn't be very big. We didn't have the power of GPT. We didn't have the processing power. We could do one hotel chain, one destination. And it took a lot of supervised training. We failed. The company went out of business. Although we proved higher conversion rate. No question about it. We proved that at Marriott. We proved that at Intercontinental Hotels, but they wouldn't change. So I guess I agree with several of the panelists that now that ship has sailed with the PR around what's going on and the fact that Expedia and Booking have both announced they're implementing ChatGPT. I think things will change. Now we have generative AI. You guys all know this, dedicated chips, huge amount of data. This can happen. So you can ask GPT some things like, I want a budget vegan restaurant with links. It can answer that question for you. You can say, what's the best hotel in Scotland with spa and golf? Google will give you 9 million answers. Not particularly useful. GPT will actually give you a good answer, but you can't book it. So it's not hooked to anything yet. And one of the guys at IBM said something interesting, that the required ingredients for real success with AI is to take public data and industry data and corporate data and put it together. And so GPT is, I think combining it with corporate data is going to be real. That's the secret sauce. So if it had consumed all the hotels in Booking.com, if it consumed all the reviews in TripAdvisor and all the articles in Google, then what kind of answer could you give? Well, then most anybody could do it. So I'm going to mention a couple startups. I'm working with just a young genius guy who basically was building a booking engine to sell to people who wanted to sell travel and put GPT on top of it, which Booking and Expedia haven't done yet. So you can say, what does it say? I want to go LA to London on the 25th of April at 2 p.m. and you can get it. It's much more powerful to do with hotels and tours, and that's coming. The thesis behind this company is it's a single line of code drop-in booking engine. So for Expedia and Booking, you'll do it themselves. The 50,000 other travel sites are going to need help because this is going to need training. And I think, if you ask me what I'm afraid of a little bit in travel, Booking.com and Expedia have good gigabytes of consumer data. The little guys don't. So how is this going to get trained? How is somebody going to help them? Not clear yet. Some of us in the room have worked with a company called Amgen. They're using AI. About 20% of corporate travel is now booked by email. It's all manual. So they're reading the emails and immediately coming back and giving somebody 3 choices within the corporate policy. They started that company looking at it as a labor saving, but myself, I think it's a killer. To me, it's like in 1978 when I had an assistant. And I leaned out the door and said, I want to go to New York tomorrow at 4:00, stay at the Hilton, thank you very much, slam the door. Right? And it would happen. Well, email is sort of the same thing. It's a lot easier than mucking around in the old UIs that travel has today. So we'll see where that goes. Talked to a company yesterday called Thatch. They help influencers sell products. So a huge amount of travel money in advertising is moving away from Google into things like Instagram. That's where younger generations get their excitement about travel. These guides sell things through Instagram, but now they start getting hundreds of DMs from people asking questions. So they want to deploy this to answer the DMs and sell them more stuff, which is kind of an interesting application. I talked to this guy yesterday as a visa business. He works with corporations. They detect that you're going to China and immediately send you an email saying, hey, you're going to China. Here's what you need to fill out the visa. But he has 100 people offshore answering questions. He wants GPT to answer questions. So a lot of this last one, this guy's doing bulk travel. So 100 firefighters hear from one of the cameras you were talking about, that there's a fire. They got to dispatch 100 at once. They can book 100 people at once, again, using AI. So I think travel is going to change a lot. I talked to a guy in Europe who was developing a booking engine, then ChatGPT was banned in Italy, so he stopped. So we'll see what happens there. I think it's going to change UI a lot. Maybe not in all industries, but in our industry, my industry, where it's in the Stone Age, to allow you to actually, 2 things to happen. 1, for the travel company to really understand your intent, and then 2, to link that intent into a product can be very powerful. And I guess the last thing I'd say is what we learned at Wayblazer in doing chat. Somebody say, I want to go to Thailand. We'd immediately show them great hotels in Thailand. Then we say, why are you going? And they say, oh, it's an anniversary. Change. Romantic hotels in Thailand, right? How much money you got? None. Okay, cheap hotels in Thailand. But as long as I think what's been wrong with a lot of these in commerce is that you asked 25 questions before you told people anything. And we learned that is if you respond each time with something, along the way, they're going to buy. So anyway, that's what I think is going to happen in at least one industry.
So how does that jive with how you guys see the world?
I have a question. So it's obviously going in that direction. There are some architectural challenges, though, currently on how you plug in these types of large language models, including how you train your own foundational model based on that is, if we can break that a bit.
So what this one guy did was he went out, got the APIs into OpenAI, plugged in a ton of travel data, found that worked pretty well, found the system itself unreliable. So we went to Microsoft and got plugged in at a different level. Now we're getting good response time and more stable answers so far. So we'll see. But yes, it has to be true. That's my stack of data up to corporate data at the top. You've got to take that data and train it.
Right.
He's been able to do that pretty well with a limited set. We'll see how it works in hotels. But we were able to do it with Watson 10 years ago. So I'm not that worried about us doing it. Although I will tell you that I got a call from a customer when we were doing that who said, why do you say the Best Western at Phoenix Airport has golf? Doesn't have golf. Couldn't have golf. Well, I went and looked at it. It had a 1-hole mini golf course. It didn't say it's golf. You're also going to
While we were telling this, I have access to the alpha version of GPT-4 plugins. So there's a plugin by Kayak and there's a plugin by Expedia.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you cannot enable both. The plugin, the model's not good enough to pick which is better. So you got it's like they live this competition question too.
But they don't book you.
They do.
Now they do. Okay.
Yeah, now they do.
Couple weeks ago.
Yeah, there's a it gives you a link, you click, and there's everything's added to your cart. Same works with Instacart. I just designed like a 5-course vegan menu for the dinner, and it's incredible how this evolves.
So I think it's going to be interesting. Maybe we'll try it. You know, it's my own home. Yeah, I think when right now these little companies are just doing booking, not things that Kayak are doing, but when you combine the worldwide domain knowledge, GPT, with then the ability to buy, that gets really interesting.
There's a big hype about autonomous agents now. So the idea is that you split a task into subtasks and ask the GPT-4 to act as a project manager, and then like has a team. And some of these team members can be other instances of ChatGPT, and some of them can be like an API to Kayak or like just a calculator, because LLMs are not very good at adding things. But yeah, this is one problem. They're not very reliable just yet, maybe for a product. Like it took me 3 tries to come up with a weekend trip to Scotland with all the bookings. Well, my wife would probably spend a few hours to do so. So that's still good.
Yeah. Well, and when it hooks to Kayak and OpenTable and, you know, the local driver and all the rest of the pieces.
Oh yeah, these are already available.
Yeah.
So let me
It's
introduce,
incredible.
let me introduce trust into the chain. May I introduce you, Andrew, on the platform? And this is a jazz orchestra. Who comes over? Trombones. Okay. Speak to that factor. Or whatever factor you want to talk about. Which factor? I was thinking the trust factor. As it plays, as AI plays out, we're talking about guardrails, how blockchains, own platforms. I talked about earlier 5 different platforms that Silicon Valley has an edge on. That being one of them, and that's what what you do. You have a fund to fund in this area.
Yeah, so I'm supervised here because I run a hedge fund of funds that invest primarily in early stage blockchain tech assets of various sorts. However, that bias in mind, I really think that the advent of AI and the concerns about the ability to create fake information and data are only accelerating, accentuating the utility of blockchains. And the reason being that authenticating and establishing provenance for everything from me, like my identity, to transactions that I have requested and authorized, to content that I've created, to even real world assets that I have ownership of, and especially in NFT digital assets. It's really hard to do and to figure out what is true when it's so easy to create. And I suppose I should check it out to AIs it, but you know, for my eyes and to machines that I understand, indistinguishable fake copies or pointers to fake copies of those things. So I think it's going to be really fundamentally important to be able to authenticate ourselves and to assert governance over choices we make and over our assets. And I think blockchains are an important complement to databases in terms of our ability to do that, because it's a database that basically that everybody has a copy of, and that once something's written, you can't write it. And that's a very, very different tool in the toolkit to establish and maintain confidence in that future state. So zooming out just briefly to sort of how the market is thinking about this, I'm effectively a VC, even though I run a hedge fund because we focus on early stage assets. And our industry, I think, is going through a little bit of a psychological existential crisis right now, because now suddenly everyone's only interested in talking about AI and not at all interested in talking about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. As a somewhat contrarian early stage VC, effectively, I love that because there's even less competition for good deal flow and valuations are even lower. But the real truth is, I think, that we're seeing these 2 technologies augmenting and enhancing the good side of what each of the others can do. And I don't think it's any accident that Sam Altman's other company that basically recently launched, somewhat contemporaneous actually with ChatGPT 4 is WorldCoin. And WorldCoin is essentially a way to prove that you're a human cryptographically, a way to prove that you something about yourself without revealing everything else about yourself, effectively pseudo-anonymously verify a claim about yourself. If you can imagine being important to do with a government or a bank or in many other aspects. And then to transact with a global, yes, cryptocurrency in association with those other two capabilities. So Sam's a much smarter guy than I am. I love what he's doing in OpenAI, but I think this is much attention to WorldCoin. So that's my take.
What do you think about proof of ID? As like WorldCoin and a bunch of newer startups, they're emphasizing that proof of stake is not even good enough. That like proof of ID is better.
So I'm not deeply technical enough to be able to adjudicate the security and the
Not in terms of
security,
yeah,
but I think in there, I mean, I've been tracking also the Proof of Humanity project that Santiago Sirius been working on for a number of years, and I just think that concept of actually being able to authenticate that you're a human. He started by putting the birth of his Santiago Sirius started by putting the birth of his daughter on the blockchain. It's the first sort of cryptographic proof of humanity, he said. However you do it technologically, I just think it's going to be a fundamentally important thing for us to do, not just because of the risk side of it, talk about it. My 88-year-old dad just got his identity stolen. It's a total pain in the you know what. It's going to be so much easier to do things like that very, very soon. And the way that he's unwound and recovered his identity, I don't think will be reliable anymore because it involves talking to people, and that's no longer going to be a reliable mode to adjust things like that. So I think it's really important on the risk side. Underappreciated, and what I hope is that it's also going to be equally empowering on the opportunity side. If I can really prove I am, and I don't need to have a centrally controlled set of credentials, whether that be my social login through Google or whether that be my bank or even my country, to be able to effectively transact, then I'm much more free to transact, regardless of the sort of posture of those entities relative to me, which maybe in the US is mostly not a big existential risk. For my father-in-law in Sudan right now, the Khartoum today is a truly existential risk, his inability to transact. I think that if he, for example, could authenticate himself, transact digitally, and prove things about himself in terms of what he owns in a way that didn't depend on a government functioning or a bank functioning or a social media platform agreeing that he was allowed to say what he needed to say, I think we'd all be much better off. And so I think that's an opportunity side, and that's sort of the Web3 vision that's always been there. But I actually think, ironically, it's going to be the advent of different technology, AI, which is going to actually cause that opportunity to finally be realized. And I hope at the end of the day, we therefore become less the product and we become more actually sort of sovereign in the way that we interact with the world.
So I have a quick question. It's I guess philosophical in a lot of ways. So a lot of people compartmentalize, right? They compartmentalize AI as a threat to trust and blockchain as a solution to trust. But maybe if you take that a little bit further, what do you guys think about the death essentially of trust? If you believe that those things are true, or if we follow that thread, what is the, I guess, existential risk to not having a trust factor anymore as a component of culture, where you have, AI that's capable of replicating anyone doing almost anything, from movies to writing to whatever, and the need for tokenization to prove who and what you are?
Well, I think it's important, as I just said, but the last thing I'll say and then turn it over is I actually am really optimistic in spite of the concerns that I just expressed. And I think it's just going to be a replacement largely of our institutions that we've relied on for trust as a practical matter. Without some of the technologies we now have in hand, that was the only way to organize and govern ourselves. And instead, I think we'll find what I call extratutional analogs of that, so that we'll be able to form our de facto institutions as communities using these tools that give us a lot more sovereignty and a lot more freedom to make choices and express those and verify those. And I think it could be a beautiful thing, actually. A lot of our institutions, prospered us as well as help.
I think generally, I've been studying communities, building ones, and like my fund is based on a concept similar to a kibbutz. And what I found is that communities that thrive, they're able to transact without limitations. A lack of trust is a transactional cost. And if there is no trust and we have to replace trust with like proof of ID and like proof of human, like blockchain, then I guess this gas fee is our transactional cost. It's much better than like, again, I have a very different perspective of trust since I'm from the Soviet Union, and this is like where you trust that nothing can be trusted. And this is a whole different perspective. It's like coming to a country where you can just run your business is a marvel. So I'm very cautious of what AI can do to this, and I think I think a lot of people answering questions are right to compartmentalize because AI is a threat to trust, and blockchain in some cases, other than crypto trading, is a solution.
A question. So I actually went on the Social Security site recently to actually register. And I don't know if you've ever done that before, but you have to put in your name, you have to put your Social Security number, and they go through a bunch of questions. And a lot of them are accessed through databases that are kind of semi-secure. So the first question is, how much PII do you need to provide to say that you are that person? And the way they do it is that of these 6 addresses, where did you live? And they give you choices because you could type something in wrong. And so I'm curious as to what your thoughts are about that approach, because that data lives in different places, but it's consolidated supposedly on a secure platform. But I answered the 12 questions I have, and I now know I'm going to get $1,000 a month, my entire. But I'm curious as to how do you think that would apply that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a far better way, because those databases are controlled by TransUnion and Experian. You know, it's the credit agencies, which is a whole other set of issues. But you know, and they are not secure. I used to work inside government, went to the White House a bunch, and my data was hacked from the Office of Personnel Management. And so I, for life, have free identity theft protection funded by your tax dollars because my data was stolen from the White House. And so not secure. But far better, regardless of the security risk, I think is the ability, like I don't want to share any more metadata than I need to for the purpose of what I'm trying to do. And so why should I have to tell somebody where I live in order to get a revenue stream, which I have earned? It doesn't necessarily relate. It shouldn't have to relate. And so if I can have what we would call in blockchain world a zero knowledge proof to actually be able to say, this is actually me, and I actually get to say where this $1,000 goes, but I don't even need to tell you my name. I can actually just prove that I have the right to this particular entitlement. To me, that would be much better.
Nash, had a question there?
Yeah. Well, too. So I lost my ID in New York a couple of weeks back, and that was a nightmare trying to fly without your ID. And so they asked me a lot of really weird questions, things like somebody at the CIA was like, you know, what are the landmarks around your home? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't pay attention. But I'm really curious about how maybe, you know, that whole ID concept, personal ID. But another area that has to do directly with that is I just did my taxes, and it was still awful, even though we have, you know, you have your accountants, you have TurboTax, you have Cash App Tax, and everybody has a tax platform. But just for the question for the panel is, do you think that personal self-reporting taxes can actually be truly disrupted to a point where we don't have to self-report anymore, where they just know how much we made? And is that crazy? Is that possible? I'm just really
You go to the
curious.
Amazon store, you walk out, they know what you took.
Exactly.
I get paid.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, like what your thoughts on self-reporting taxes, and can that stop? For the regular people who, you know.
This is a really good question because
Sounds like a fintech startup.
we have. So one startup in our portfolio called Kick.co that just recently raised the round from OpenAI fund, by the way. So they are solving taxes for small businesses, but on the business side.
Okay.
So you plug in all of your bank accounts, they are played, and they spit out the tax return for that easy. Incredibly accurate too. So what I think, well, I'm still waiting for my American passport, so I need to say that the US government is doing an amazing job. However, I can see some room for improvement. For innovation, yeah, there's too many people employed by IRS that are doing the jobs that are not necessarily fulfilling.
And there's also, I mean, there's a basic fair, so I care a lot more about privacy than I used to, but I think most people still won't for a long time, especially in places like this country, unlike places where I have my relatives and in-laws and maybe Soviet Union. But there's also a fairness and equality argument in terms of anything that's hard to do. If you have more time to focus on it, more expertise, more resources to hire somebody to help you with it, like taxes in particular, the more empowered you are to have the outcome be good for you. And it's incredibly unequal in that regard. It's obvious to all of us that the richest people pay the least on a percentage basis, generally speaking, partly because you have the expertise to apply to make things work out in your favor in a way that's legal, but I don't think necessarily fair. So the more you could sort of anonymize and level the playing field of the internal mechanics of figuring out your taxes, the more equal I think the outcome would be. And so, yeah, I'd be a big fan of that, albeit at the risk of the more of your underlying life that you reveal, the more there are potential corollary privacy risks.
So here we would.
Come join our 361 firm community of investors and thought leaders. We have a lot of events created by the community as we collaborate on investments and philanthropic interests. Join us.